These psychological tricks are the silent weapons of leaders, negotiators, seducers, and strategists. You can use these to bend a room, tilt a dynamic, shape outcomes, and ultimately gain power and control over any situation or any person. This is not about manipulation. It's about psychological precision, the deliberate application of behavioral insights to gain advantage, control perception, and influence reality. Let's begin. Mirroring. You already know the basics. Subtly mimic body language to build trust. But the advanced technique often used in high-stakes negotiations is known as pacing and leading. Here's how it works. You begin by matching the other person's posture, energy, or speech rhythm. This builds subconscious rapport. Once you notice them mirroring you back, you subtly change something. Maybe you lean back. Pause longer between words, cross your arms. If they start copying your shift, it means you've taken psychological control of the interaction. At that moment, you become the emotional and behavioral leader. You're setting the tone. They are following. It's the difference between playing the music and being the conductor. Use this to gently guide conversations, ease social tension, or pull someone out of an emotional spiral. It's subtle, invisible, but incredibly effective. The pause. Silence isn't weakness, it's dominance. When someone asks a question and you pause before answering, it shows you're measured, confident, and unfazed. You're not rushing to please, you're weighing your thoughts, which makes others perceive you as wise and in control. After making a strong point, pausing lets your words land with more weight. It gives the listener space to absorb, reflect, and react internally. If they feel awkward and fill the silence, that's where you see who's truly holding the frame. In high-stakes moments, the person most comfortable with silence is often the one with the most power. Practicing intentional silence isn't easy, but once mastered, it becomes a weapon. Let others chase your pauses. The power gaze. Eye contact is one of the most primal ways to establish dominance, or submission. Holding someone's gaze just a second longer than expected conveys certainty. It says, "I see you, I'm not flinching." But here's the nuance. Your face should remain relaxed. A steady gaze paired with a soft, curious expression disarms people while keeping you in the driver's seat. Think of it as assertive calmness. People subconsciously interpret sustained eye contact as confidence. And in uncertain situations, they follow the person who appears most certain. Master this gaze, and you won't need many words. Your eyes will speak for you. Labeling emotions, tactical empathy. When you name what someone is feeling before they name it themselves, you display emotional intelligence and gain instant influence. Examples. It seems like this has been frustrating. It sounds like you're feeling overwhelmed. It looks like this really matters to you. Why it works. People want to feel seen, and when you show that you can identify their inner state, they drop their guard. They start trusting you more. This is the cornerstone of tactical empathy, a technique used by hostage negotiators to build connection under extreme pressure. Doesn't mean agreeing, it means acknowledging. Labeling someone's emotion doesn't weaken your position, it strengthens your ability to influence them. Because the moment someone feels understood, they're far more open to understanding you. Anchoring. Anchoring is the psychological bias where people rely too heavily on the first piece of information offered. Imagine you're negotiating a salary. You say, "I was thinking $95,000. That number now becomes the mental anchor. Even if your walkaway number is $85,000, the other person's counteroffer will be judged relative to your initial number. Anchoring works because our brains love reference points. Without one, we feel uncertain. But the first number thrown into the conversation, even if arbitrary, plants itself like a seed. Everything that follows grows in its shadow. Use anchoring early, use it deliberately, and understand that whoever sets the frame first often shapes the entire negotiation. Framing. Words shape reality, not in a mystical sense, in a psychological one. Framing is the art of controlling how information is presented so that it triggers the desired emotional or cognitive response. Example. Instead of saying we have a problem, you say we have an opportunity to improve this. Both are true, but one invites fear, the other invites curiosity. Or consider you're wrong versus that's an interesting perspective. Here's another angle. Same outcome, totally different response. Framing is persuasion before persuasion. It changes the emotional terrain of the conversation, tilting it in your favour. The Ben Franklin effect. People tend to like those they've helped more than those who've helped them. It sounds backward, but it's a proven psychological quirk. When someone does you a favour, their brain tries to make sense of the behaviour, so it concludes, I must like this person. Even a small ask can activate this effect. Borrow a book, ask for advice, request input. Once someone invests in you, they're more likely to continue supporting you. It's counterintuitive, but deeply powerful. Don't always try to impress people. Instead, give them a reason to invest in you. The foot in the door technique. If you want someone to agree to something big, start small. This is a cornerstone principle in sales and influence. Once a person says yes to a minor request, their subconscious starts to shift. They begin to see themselves as agreeable, supportive, or aligned with you, making them more likely to say yes again. By securing a small yes first, you create a sense of consistency in the other person's mind. Humans naturally want to appear reliable and consistent, so once they've agreed to a minor request, they're far more likely to agree to a larger one later. This incremental approach quietly builds momentum and power, letting you guide decisions step by step without triggering resistance or alarm. Example, first, could I get your opinion on this? Later, would you be willing to help me on this project? That first micro-agreement softened the path for the second. It's not about manipulation, it's about building momentum. The illusion of choice. People resist being told what to do, but they accept being given options. That's the power of the illusion of choice. You offer 2 or more outcomes, but all of them serve your purpose. Example. Instead of, do you want to work on this, ask, would you prefer to handle this section or the other one? Both paths serve the goal, but the person feels empowered because they got to choose. You've reduced resistance and preserved their autonomy. Control doesn't always look like force. Often it looks like generosity with invisible limits. The contrast principle. When 2 ideas or offers are presented back to back, the second is judged relative to the first. If the first seems outrageous, the second feels more reasonable, even if it wouldn't have on its own. Example, you ask someone to take on a huge task. They decline. Then you offer a smaller one, the one you really wanted. Now it feels like a relief. This works in pricing, favours, commitments, and even arguments. Set the bar high, let them decline, then present your real ask. In contrast, it seems easy, even generous. The power of silence. Silence is one of the most underrated tools in psychological influence. When you pause instead of rushing to fill every gap with words, you create an aura of confidence and control. People tend to feel uneasy in prolonged silence, which can make them reveal more information or rush to fill the void with concessions or agreements. Silence signals that you're comfortable with yourself and your position, and that you're not desperate to please or persuade. It also forces others to think more deeply about what was said, often increasing the perceived importance of your words. Strategic silence is a powerful form of non-verbal communication that can shift the balance of power without uttering a single additional syllable. Framing the narrative. Control the story, control the outcome. Framing is the art of presenting information in a way that shapes how people perceive it. By choosing specific words, tone, and context, you can guide people's opinions and decisions. For example, describing a challenging situation as an opportunity for growth versus a problem influences how others respond emotionally and intellectually. Framing taps into our cognitive biases, our tendency to rely on mental shortcuts, making it easier to sway judgments without overt argument. Those who master framing can subtly influence entire conversations and negotiations, steering others toward their desired conclusions with finesse. The anchoring effect. The anchoring effect is a cognitive bias where people rely heavily on the first piece of information they receive when making decisions. This initial anchor sets a mental baseline that influences all subsequent judgments. For example, in price negotiations, starting with a high offer anchors the discussion around that figure, making lower offers seem more reasonable by comparison. Recognizing and using anchoring can give you a significant advantage by setting expectations in your favor from the start. It works because our brains are wired to conserve mental effort, often settling for the first plausible reference point rather than searching for more accurate information. The scarcity principle. Scarcity creates perceived value. When something appears rare, limited, or in high demand, people assign it greater worth and urgency. This principle applies beyond material goods. It works on time, attention, and opportunities. If you imply that your time or cooperation is scarce, others are more likely to respect and prioritize it. Scarcity triggers a primal fear of loss, making people act quickly and decisively. Leaders and influencers who understand scarcity use it to enhance their bargaining power, create urgency, and inspire loyalty by making their presence or resources seem exclusive and precious. Social proof. Humans are social creatures, wired to follow the crowd as a survival mechanism. Social proof is the psychological phenomenon where people copy the actions of others to feel secure and accepted. This effect can be harnessed by demonstrating that others approve of your ideas, products, or behaviors. Testimonials, endorsements, visible support, or even showing numbers of followers can powerfully influence opinions. When others see that a belief or behavior is popular, they are more likely to adopt it themselves. Social proof reduces uncertainty and increases trust, making it a critical tool for gaining influence and power in groups or communities. Triangulation. Power often hides in the spaces between people. Triangulation is the tactic of controlling a relationship by introducing a third party, not to resolve conflict, but to manipulate the dynamic. Instead of addressing someone directly, you speak about them to someone else. You create comparisons, alliances, rivalries, and through this triangle you become the anchor, the center of gravity everyone orbits. This technique thrives in unstable environments, workplaces, families, social circles, anywhere emotions run high and communication is indirect. You might praise one person to another just enough to spark competition, or confide in one while subtly criticizing the other. This forces both people to seek your approval, to align with you, to keep you close. You've created a quiet war, but you hold the peace treaty. Why it works is simple. People fear exclusion and crave validation. When they sense that your attention is conditional, when they believe someone else is closer to you, more trusted, more liked, they act to win you over, they compete for your favor, and in doing so, they give you control. In relationships, triangulation can be as subtle as mentioning how someone else treats you better. In teams, it can mean sharing selective feedback with each person. You're not lying, you're shaping the emotional terrain, and by doing so, you make yourself essential. The one who knows everything, the one who holds the balance. Used well, triangulation makes people depend on you for truth, for direction, for connection. But its power isn't in what's said, it's in what's unsaid. In the small comparisons, the planted doubts, the slow erosion of unity that leaves you as the sole constant. Divide and influence, not through force, but through subtle arrangement. That's how control thrives in the spaces between. Silent treatment. The absence of words can speak louder than any scream. The silent treatment is a powerful emotional weapon, wielded not with aggression but with withdrawal. When you stop responding, when you cut off conversation and affection, you create a void. That silence becomes a pressure cooker of uncertainty, anxiety, and longing. People crave connection. When it's withheld, their mind starts searching desperately for ways to regain it. This tactic works because human beings are social creatures wired for interaction. Isolation triggers the brain's alarm systems. When someone ignores you, you begin to question what you said, what you did wrong, how you can fix it. This inward focus weakens resistance and increases the desire to please. For power, the silent treatment is subtle yet devastating. It's a form of emotional punishment without confrontation. In relationships, leaders or manipulators use it to enforce boundaries without open conflict. Imagine a colleague who ignores your emails or a partner who withdraws affection until you comply with their wishes. The silence says, "I hold your approval and I'll take it away." The control lies not in words, but in absence. The key to using silent treatment effectively is timing and moderation. Too long, and the silence breeds resentment instead of compliance. Used carefully, it creates just enough discomfort to bring the other person running back, eager to restore peace. In the quiet, you become the power. Illusory truth effect. Truth is often less about facts and more about familiarity. The illusory truth effect is the phenomenon where repeated statements are perceived as more truthful than new or contradictory information. The brain equates repetition with reliability, even if the information is false or misleading. The more we hear something, the more it feels real. This works because our brains prioritize efficiency over accuracy. Processing new information requires effort. Familiar information feels safe, effortless, and trustworthy. This cognitive shortcut makes repetition a powerful tool in shaping beliefs and attitudes. For power and control, the illusory truth effect allows you to shape perceptions by controlling the narrative's frequency rather than its validity. Political campaigns, advertising, and social movements exploit this by repeating key messages over and over. The listener may eventually accept ideas not because they've been convinced logically, but because they feel right from sheer familiarity. You can use this tactic by introducing your key points repeatedly throughout conversations or communications. Subtle phrases, ideas, or frames that echo your agenda make your influence grow quietly in the background. Over time, the repetition softens resistance and primes agreement. The power lies not just in what you say, but how often you say it. Repetition is the whisper that becomes the accepted truth. Time pressure. When the clock is ticking, judgment falters. Time pressure leverages urgency to reduce careful thought and increase emotional decision-making. Faced with a deadline or scarcity of time, people scramble to comply, fearing the consequences of delay. This triggers a survival mode where impulse overrides logic. The effectiveness of time pressure stems from the brain's need to conserve energy and avoid stress. Under pressure, the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for critical thinking, shuts down. Instead, the limbic system, emotional and reactive, takes control. This makes people more suggestible and compliant. Power comes from creating or emphasizing deadlines. Whether it's a limited time offer, an impending decision, or a fast-approaching event, pressing the clock forces people to act before they're ready. Salespeople often use "only today" or "while supplies last" to push purchases. Leaders can use tight deadlines to move reluctant teams into action. To wield this tactic, introduce urgency clearly but without panic. Frame time constraints as natural or necessary to avoid suspicion. The goal is to accelerate agreement before doubt or resistance can build. In the race against the clock, those who manipulate time pressure control the outcome. Anchoring bias. Our minds crave a starting point, a frame of reference, before making decisions. Anchoring bias is the cognitive tendency to rely heavily on the first piece of information encountered. That initial anchor shapes all subsequent judgments, often irrationally so. This works because the brain simplifies complex decisions by clinging to initial data, even if it's irrelevant or arbitrary. The first number you hear, the first opinion you see, colours how you evaluate everything that follows. It's a shortcut that saves mental energy but can trap you in bias. In gaining power and control, anchoring bias allows you to shape perceptions by controlling the first impression. For example, in negotiations, naming a high starting price can make later offers seem reasonable, even if they're inflated. Presenting an extreme position early shifts the entire discussion. To use this, always set the anchor. Be the first to speak, first to frame the discussion, first to offer numbers or opinions. The anchor acts like a psychological magnet, pulling thoughts toward your intended zone. The power is in being the one who sets the baseline, determining how others perceive value, fairness, or truth. False scarcity. Humans assign value to rarity. The rarer something is, the more precious it becomes in our minds. False scarcity exploits this by creating the illusion that a resource, opportunity, or item is limited, even when it's not. This perception triggers urgency and fear of missing out, driving people to act quickly, often against their better judgment. The reason this works is tied to our evolutionary wiring. Scarcity signals danger. Resources may run out, so seize them now. This triggers impulse decisions, overrides critical thinking, and makes us vulnerable to influence. For power, false scarcity is a masterstroke. Marketers use it constantly. Only 3 left. Limited time offer. Exclusive deal ends soon. Politicians create urgency around legislation. Leaders imply that cooperation is a rare privilege. The illusion of rarity pressures people to conform, comply, and act before they can reconsider. To harness this tactic, frame your offer or request as unique and fleeting. Even if there's no real shortage, suggest that waiting means losing out. The fear of loss motivates faster agreement and reduces resistance. By controlling perceived scarcity, you control behaviour. Framing manipulation. The way information is presented, the frame, shapes how it's perceived. Framing manipulation is the art of choosing words, contexts, or angles to influence interpretation and decision-making without changing the facts. It's a subtle yet powerful way to steer thoughts and actions by highlighting certain elements and obscuring others. This works because the human brain doesn't just process data, it interprets it within a context. A glass described as half full feels optimistic, while half empty suggests loss. People rarely evaluate information neutrally. They rely on frames to create meaning quickly. For power, framing manipulation allows you to control the narrative and thus control choices. In negotiations, presenting a proposal as a discount rather than a price increase changes willingness to accept. In leadership, framing a change as an opportunity rather than a requirement invites cooperation rather than resistance. To use framing, carefully select language that aligns with your goals. Emphasize benefits over costs, potential gains over risks. Reframe objections as misunderstandings or opportunities for growth. By shaping the frame, you shape reality itself. Power is in the lens through which others see the situation. Social proof exploitation. We look to others to guide our behaviour, especially in uncertainty. Social proof exploitation taps into this tendency by presenting the illusion that many people already support or agree with an idea, product, or leader. This creates a bandwagon effect where compliance feels safe, normal, and even necessary. This works because humans are herd animals. Following the crowd reduces social risk and the mental burden of decision-making. When others appear to approve, it signals that the choice is correct and beneficial. For control, social proof is invaluable. Showing that everyone is doing it pressures individuals to conform to avoid exclusion or judgment. Businesses display reviews and testimonials. Politicians highlight endorsements. Even in smaller groups, naming allies or supporters subtly nudges others to follow suit. To wield social proof, highlight examples of compliance and approval wherever possible. Use stories, statistics, or endorsements that imply widespread acceptance. When people believe they're part of a majority, they're more likely to act in line with the group and with your wishes. Cognitive dissonance. When our beliefs and actions clash, the mind feels tension, a discomfort known as cognitive dissonance. To ease this, people either change their beliefs or justify their behaviour. This self-rationalising process can be leveraged for control by creating situations where individuals feel compelled to align with your perspective to reduce internal conflict. This works because no one likes discomfort. The desire for psychological consistency is strong. Once someone commits to an action or idea, they will adapt their beliefs to justify it, even if it means embracing your agenda. For power, inducing cognitive dissonance can trap people in your influence. For example, if someone agrees publicly to a minor point, they will likely support larger points later to avoid feeling hypocritical. If you highlight inconsistencies in their thinking, they may adjust their position to reduce discomfort, often in your favour. To use this, create small commitments or statements that align with your goals, then gently expose contradictions in their current beliefs or actions, nudging them toward your position. The discomfort they seek to resolve makes them more malleable and easier to influence. Repetition hypnosis. Repetition is more than persuasion. It's a form of mental conditioning. Repetition hypnosis involves calmly and consistently repeating words, ideas, or phrases to implant them deeply into the subconscious mind. Over time, these repeated messages bypass critical thinking and become accepted truths, quietly steering thoughts and behaviours. This works because the brain's processing filters relax with familiarity. Constant exposure dulls resistance, especially when the tone is steady and unforced. The repeated ideas become mental habits, shaping perceptions without the individual actively realizing it. For control, repetition hypnosis can be used in speeches, conversations, or media to embed your influence subtly. Leaders who repeat core values or slogans build loyalty. Negotiators who revisit key points sow agreement. In personal interactions, calmly restating your perspective over time softens opposition. To apply this, choose your core message and weave it gently but consistently into dialogue or communication. Avoid aggressive insistence. Instead, favour a calm, rhythmic delivery. Over time, your repeated message becomes part of the listener's inner narrative, shifting their mindset toward your goals. Priming. Priming is the subtle art of preparing someone's mind to respond in a certain way by exposing them to related stimuli beforehand. It works unconsciously, activating associations that influence thoughts, feelings, or behaviours without overt awareness. This happens because the brain links ideas through networks. When one concept is triggered, connected ideas become more accessible. For example, seeing the word power might make someone more likely to behave assertively shortly after. For power, priming allows you to shape reactions before a direct request or interaction. By introducing related cues, words, images, tones, You prepare the ground for your influence to take root more easily. In negotiations, casually mentioning deadlines or competition primes urgency and cooperation. In leadership, praising qualities like loyalty or diligence primes team members to act accordingly. To use priming, embed relevant signals or references subtly before you want compliance or agreement. These can be verbal hints, environmental cues, or even body language. The power lies in conditioning responses ahead of time, so when the moment comes, your influence flows naturally and effortlessly. Information overload. When too much information floods the mind, clarity evaporates. Overloading with information overwhelms decision-making by presenting so many details, facts, or options that the brain struggles to process them all. This mental chaos weakens resistance and makes people more likely to accept simplified conclusions or defer judgment to you. This tactic works because cognitive resources are limited. The brain can only handle so much input before it defaults to heuristics or gives up trying to analyze thoroughly. When confronted with excessive data, the mind tires and becomes suggestible, often relying on trust or authority to guide decisions. For power, information overload is a way to control by drowning others in complexity. Whether in negotiations, debates, or leadership, bombarding with data can confuse opponents or followers, causing them to surrender the narrative or comply just to reduce stress. Presenting contradictory facts or rapid-fire arguments leaves them unable to keep up, increasing your influence. To use this, provide large volumes of information layered with complexity at key moments. Don't allow space for counter-arguments to form easily. The goal is to overwhelm, then guide others toward the simpler, clearer path you offer. Control emerges from mastering the flow and intensity of information. The Ben Franklin effect. The Ben Franklin effect reveals a curious paradox of human psychology. People who do favours for someone tend to like that person more afterward. This happens because the mind seeks consistency. If you helped someone, your brain convinces you it must be because you like them, even if you initially didn't. This effect works because people naturally justify their actions to reduce cognitive dissonance. Doing something kind or cooperative creates an internal narrative of liking and trust. This makes the person more open and compliant in the future. For power and control, the Ben Franklin effect is a subtle way to build influence. Instead of trying to win over someone with arguments or charm, ask for small favours or cooperation first. When they help, they unconsciously increase their affinity toward you. This opens the door for deeper persuasion and control. You can use this by requesting minor assistance, borrowing something, asking for advice, or involving them in a task. Their willingness to help builds a psychological bond that you can leverage for greater influence. It's a gentle but effective path to power rooted in human consistency. Negative reinforcement. Negative reinforcement is often misunderstood as punishment, but it's simply the removal of an unpleasant stimulus to increase a desired behaviour. By taking away something annoying or stressful, when someone complies or acts as you want, you reinforce their behaviour through relief and reward. This tactic works because the brain is wired to avoid pain and seek comfort. The promise of relief motivates compliance faster than abstract rewards or punishments. People learn that obedience ends discomfort, which strengthens your control over their actions. For power, negative reinforcement can be used to shape behaviour through subtle withdrawal of negative consequences. For example, a manager stops nagging when employees meet expectations, or a partner ceases criticism when cooperation occurs. The removal of pressure creates a positive feedback loop that increases your influence. To use negative reinforcement, identify what your target finds aversive and condition their behaviour by removing it when they align with your goals. The power lies in controlling the unpleasant stimuli and offering relief selectively, making compliance the easiest path. False flattery. False flattery is a potent tool that uses insincere praise to manipulate emotions and influence behavior. When people receive compliments, especially unexpected or exaggerated, they feel valued and validated, which lowers their defenses and increases their willingness to comply. This tactic works because everyone desires acceptance and esteem. Flattery taps into these basic needs by creating a sense of connection and goodwill, even if the praise isn't genuine. The receiver's ego feels boosted, which makes them more receptive to suggestions or requests. For power, false flattery opens doors that direct demands cannot. By complimenting someone's abilities, appearance, or character, you build rapport and trust. This makes it easier to sway decisions or gain favors without resistance. To use false flattery effectively, be subtle and specific. General or over-the-top praise can seem fake and backfire. Instead, highlight particular qualities or achievements that matter to the person. The goal is to create warmth and appreciation, softening their stance and aligning their interests with yours. Intermittent reinforcement. Intermittent reinforcement is a psychological tactic where rewards or positive responses are given unpredictably, rather than consistently. This unpredictability makes the behavior more resistant to extinction, because the person never knows when the next reward will come, so they keep trying or complying in hope of it. This works because intermittent rewards create a strong motivational pull. The uncertainty triggers anticipation and excitement, much like gambling. The brain's reward system is highly sensitive to irregular patterns, which makes the behavior more deeply ingrained. For power and control, intermittent reinforcement is incredibly effective in maintaining influence over others. Leaders or manipulators might offer praise, attention, or approval sporadically rather than regularly, which keeps followers eager and compliant. The unpredictability prevents boredom and maintains engagement. To use this, mix positive reinforcement with neutral or absent responses in your interactions. Don't always reward cooperation. Sometimes withhold it to build suspense and desire. This keeps people striving to regain your favour, deepening their investment in your control. The fear-then-relief trick. The fear-then-relief trick is a manipulation technique that first induces anxiety or tension in someone, then quickly removes it, creating a powerful emotional release. This sudden relief lowers their mental defenses and makes them more open to suggestions. This works because strong emotions interrupt normal critical thinking. When fear is abruptly lifted, the brain experiences a rush of relief and gratitude, making the person more suggestible in that moment of vulnerability. For power, this tactic can be used to influence decisions or behavior by engineering controlled emotional ups and downs. For example, presenting a scary or stressful scenario, then reassuring or offering a solution, primes people to agree with you or follow your lead. To apply this, create a brief, manageable sense of fear or uncertainty, then swiftly replace it with comfort or assurance. The emotional rollercoaster softens resistance and increases compliance during the moment of relief. Reverse psychology. Reverse psychology involves encouraging someone to do the opposite of what you actually want them to do, relying on their natural tendency to assert independence and resist being controlled. By suggesting a contrary position, you prompt them to rebel in the direction you desire. This works because humans dislike feeling coerced or controlled. When told not to do something, the impulse to assert autonomy often overrides rational judgment, leading to the desired behavior. For power and control, reverse psychology is a subtle way to direct actions without direct commands. It's especially useful with people who resist authority or explicit requests. By framing your desires as objections or doubts, you trigger their need to prove independence, which ironically aligns with your goals. To use this, gently hint at the undesirability of your true objective, planting a seed of rebellion. This indirect approach nudges the target to act as you wish, feeling it's their own choice. Planned vulnerability. Planned vulnerability is the deliberate showing of weakness or openness to build trust and lower others' defenses. By exposing a controlled amount of personal flaws or doubts, you invite empathy and connection, which can increase your influence. This works because vulnerability humanizes you. It signals honesty and authenticity, encouraging others to reciprocate with trust and cooperation. When done strategically, it disarms suspicion and resistance. For power, planned vulnerability is a paradoxical tactic. While it appears to weaken you, it actually strengthens control by deepening emotional bonds. Leaders who admit faults or fears often gain loyalty and influence more effectively than those who project invincibility. To use this, carefully share personal struggles or uncertainties relevant to the situation, making sure it feels genuine but not excessive. The goal is to foster closeness that smooths the path for your influence. Guilt seeding. Guilt seeding involves planting subtle feelings of guilt or responsibility in others to motivate compliance or favourable behaviour. By triggering moral or emotional discomfort, you encourage people to act in ways that relieve that guilt, often aligning with your objectives. This works because guilt is a powerful emotional motivator. It compels people to make amends or correct perceived wrongs, sometimes even preemptively, to restore their self-image and relationships. For power, guilt seeding is a quiet but effective tool. It can be used to make others feel responsible for outcomes or the well-being of relationships, nudging them toward cooperation or submission. This tactic is common in interpersonal manipulation and leadership. To use guilt seeding, subtly highlight ways someone's actions or inactions might negatively impact others or themselves. Avoid direct accusations. Instead, imply expectations or responsibilities that provoke reflection and drive compliance to alleviate guilt. False consensus effect. The false consensus effect is the tendency to overestimate how much others share our beliefs, attitudes, or behaviours. Exploiting this bias involves making people believe that your views or actions are widely accepted, which increases their willingness to conform. This works because people seek social validation and fear isolation. When they think an opinion is the majority view, they align with it to belong and avoid conflict. For power, invoking the false consensus effect helps normalize your position and pressure others to comply. By presenting your ideas as popular or standard, you reduce resistance and increase acceptance. To use this, casually reference supposed common agreements or shared beliefs in conversations or messaging. Even if exaggerated, implying that most people think this way primes compliance through perceived social normativity. Forced commitment. Forced commitment is the tactic of getting someone to commit, often subtly or gradually, to a course of action or belief. Once committed, people feel psychological pressure to remain consistent with their choice, increasing your control over their behaviour. This works because humans value consistency in their actions and self-image. Breaking commitments creates discomfort, so they stick to their word or initial steps even if reluctant. For power, forced commitment can be used to lock people into long-term compliance. Small initial agreements lead to bigger ones. Public commitments are particularly effective because social pressure reinforces adherence. To use this, encourage small but meaningful commitments early on, signing up for a task, agreeing verbally, or making a minor concession. Then build on these steps to deepen control through escalating consistency. Deliberate misinterpretation. Deliberate misinterpretation is the strategic twisting or misunderstanding of someone's words or actions to confuse, distract, or gain an advantage. By reframing their statements or intentions, you can shift blame, sow doubt, or force them onto the defensive. This works because misinterpretations create ambiguity and uncertainty. The target must then spend time clarifying or correcting, which drains energy and focus, giving you the upper hand. For power, it's a way to destabilize opponents or redirect conversations. It can be used to control narratives, undermine confidence, or avoid accountability. To use this, intentionally interpret ambiguous statements in ways that benefit you, then insist on your version until the other party struggles to reclaim control. This keeps you in command of the dialogue. Confession triggers. Confession triggers are subtle cues or questions designed to encourage someone to reveal information, secrets, or feelings that increase your understanding and leverage over them. These triggers lower defenses and build trust, making people more open to sharing. This works because humans have a natural desire to unburden and connect. When prompted correctly, people feel safe to disclose more than they intended. For power, eliciting confessions or admissions deepens influence by gaining insight into vulnerabilities, motives, or intentions. This knowledge can be used strategically to guide or manipulate. To use confession triggers, employ empathetic listening, open-ended questions, and non-judgmental responses. Create an atmosphere of safety that encourages disclosure without pressure. Pacing and leading. Pacing and leading is a technique where you first mirror or match someone's behavior, language, or emotional state, pacing, to build rapport and trust, then gradually guide them toward desired thoughts or actions, leading. This works because people are naturally drawn to those who seem like them. Matching behavior creates subconscious comfort and openness, making the subsequent influence more effective. For power, pacing and leading smooths the path for persuasion. It reduces resistance by first aligning with the person's current state, before steering them in the direction you want. To use this, observe and subtly imitate body language, tone, or phrasing to create connection. Once rapport is established, gently introduce suggestions or new perspectives, guiding them toward your goals. False equivalence. False equivalence is the logical fallacy of presenting two unrelated or unequal things as if they are comparable. This manipulation distorts reasoning and can create confusion, deflect criticism, or justify questionable actions. This works because people often rely on analogies or comparisons to make sense of complex issues. Misleading equivalences can skew perception and weaken critical evaluation. For power, false equivalence helps in defending actions or ideas by muddying the waters. It can neutralize objections or create doubt, making opposition less effective. To use this, draw flawed comparisons between your position and another that seems similar but differs in key ways. Highlight superficial similarities to distract from meaningful differences, shifting opinions in your favor. The door-in-the-face technique. Now, consider the opposite approach. Start with a large, often unreasonable request, one you expect to be refused. Then, retreat to a smaller, more reasonable request. This contrast makes the second request seem far more acceptable, increasing the chances that it will be granted. This is the door-in-the-face technique. It works because of the principle of reciprocity. When someone concedes by lowering their demand, we feel compelled to also concede and agree. It's a subtle dance of give and take designed to shift the balance of power in your favor by managing expectations. Using confident body language. Power speaks without words. Your posture, gestures, and movement broadcast volumes about your confidence and status. Standing tall with shoulders back, maintaining steady eye contact, and using purposeful gestures all signal that you're in control. When you adopt confident body language, others are more likely to listen, respect, and follow. Conversely, slouched or closed-off postures invite dismissal or disregard. This is not about arrogance. It's about owning your space and communicating certainty, an unspoken but potent way to influence and command presence. The principle of reciprocity. Reciprocity is one of the oldest social rules. We feel compelled to return favours. When you give first, whether it's help, a compliment, or valuable information, you create a subtle obligation in others. This obligation can later be leveraged to gain compliance or support. Reciprocity builds goodwill and trust, but it also builds power because it puts others in your debt. The key is to be genuine and strategic in your giving, ensuring it's perceived as thoughtful and valuable, not manipulative. Control the environment. Power is often about more than just words, it's about context. Controlling your environment, whether a meeting room, social setting, or virtual space, can give you an invisible advantage. Arrange seating to position yourself in a place of prominence. Manage lighting, background noise, or even digital settings to create a mood that favours your agenda. When you control the physical or psychological space, you subtly influence how people feel and behave, tilting interactions in your favour without direct confrontation. The chameleon effect. Humans are wired to connect through similarity. The chameleon effect is the unconscious mimicry of others' behaviours, speech patterns and moods. When you subtly mirror someone, you create rapport and trust without them realising it. This effect can be deliberately used to build influence. Matching a person's energy, pace or tone makes them feel understood and accepted. It's a powerful way to lower defences, foster connection, and gain subtle control over social dynamics. The power of framing questions. How you ask a question can control the answers you get and shape the entire conversation. Framing questions with positive or negative assumptions nudges people towards certain responses. For example, instead of asking, "Why did you fail at this?" try, "What challenges did you overcome here?" The former frames the situation as a failure, eliciting defensiveness. The latter highlights effort and progress, encouraging openness. Skilled influencers use framing questions to guide thoughts and reveal information that supports their goals, all while keeping the other person feeling comfortable and respected. Use of pauses and pacing. Speaking fast may show excitement, but controlled pacing shows authority. Strategic pauses, pausing before or after a key point, draw attention and let your words sink in. This slows the conversation's rhythm and creates a commanding presence. Pauses also give you time to observe reactions and decide your next move, keeping you in control. The listener's brain uses these gaps to process, making your message more memorable and impactful. Mastering pacing and pauses is like conducting an orchestra. You lead the flow, deciding when to amplify or soften the message. Using vulnerability to build trust. Showing vulnerability may seem counterintuitive in gaining power, but when done authentically, it builds deep trust and rapport. Sharing a personal story or admitting a mistake humanizes you and reduces social distance. People tend to respond with empathy and reciprocity, opening up and lowering their guard. This emotional connection can give you influence over others, as they feel safer and more willing to follow. Vulnerability, wielded carefully, is a bridge, connecting authority with approachability. Strategic use of humour. Humour breaks tension and creates bonds. When you make others laugh, you become more likeable and memorable. Strategic humour, used at the right moment, can diffuse conflict, soften criticism, and make your ideas more appealing. It signals confidence. You're comfortable enough to be playful, even in serious situations. However, humour must be authentic and appropriate. Forced or insensitive jokes backfire. When done well, humour is a subtle form of power, opening doors that logic and force cannot. Mirroring vocal tone and tempo. Just as body language can be mirrored, so can voice. Matching someone's vocal tone, pitch and tempo subconsciously signals rapport and empathy. If they speak softly and slowly, lowering your voice and slowing your speech can foster connection. If they're energetic and fast-paced, mirroring that energy can build enthusiasm and trust. This vocal syncing makes conversations feel more natural and cooperative, gently increasing your influence without overt persuasion. The power of names. Using someone's name in conversation is a simple yet powerful psychological tool. It personalizes your interaction and signals respect and attention. Hearing their own name activates positive feelings and focus, making them more receptive to your message. Skillful communicators sprinkle names naturally throughout dialogue, strengthening bonds and authority. It's a subtle reminder that you see and acknowledge the person as an individual, deepening connection and control. The decoy effect. The decoy effect involves introducing a third, less attractive option to influence choice. When people compare three options, the presence of a less favourable decoy makes one of the other two appear more desirable. Marketers use this all the time. For example, offering a pricey large coffee, a cheap small coffee, and a medium-priced medium coffee positioned to look like the best value. In negotiations or persuasion, introducing a less attractive alternative can push your preferred option into the spotlight, guiding decisions subtly but effectively. Priming the mind. Priming is the act of subtly planting a seed in someone's subconscious before the real message arrives. It's not about manipulation, it's about context. When you introduce certain words, ideas, or images beforehand, the brain becomes more receptive to related information. For example, if you mention strength, resilience, or leadership in passing before making a proposal, the listener's mind is already tuned to associate you with those qualities. It's like adjusting the lighting before unveiling the painting. You don't change the picture, but you do change how it's seen. Negative assertion. Sometimes the most powerful move is to lean into criticism. Instead of denying a flaw or mistake, agree with it on your own terms. If someone says, "You seem a bit intense," and you reply, "I am, especially when I care about something deeply," you flip the narrative. You remove their ammunition and reframe the story. Negative assertion disarms confrontation, shows confidence and prevents escalation. It also subtly shifts control back to you, as you're the one defining what that flaw really means. Curiosity gaps. The human brain is addicted to closure. When a piece of information is left open or incomplete, the mind craves the missing part. This is the essence of the curiosity gap. It's why headlines like, "You'll never believe what happened next" work, even when we know it's a trick. In conversation or presentations, you can use this principle to keep attention high. Pose an intriguing question, share part of a story, or hint at something to come, then pause. Curiosity keeps people leaning in, and when they lean in, you lead. Scarcity and urgency. When something feels limited, it becomes more valuable. Scarcity is one of the oldest psychological levers of influence. Only a few left. Time's almost up. This opportunity won't last. These signals trigger fear of missing out, and that urgency drives action. People are more likely to comply, agree, or commit when they believe time or options are slipping away. But the key is authenticity. Manufactured scarcity breeds distrust. Used with care, it creates momentum. It makes people move. Anchoring emotions. People remember how you made them feel, not what you said. Anchoring is about tying a specific emotional state to your presence or message. When you consistently trigger a sense of calm, excitement, safety, or inspiration in others, their brain begins to associate that feeling with you. Over time, just your presence can reactivate that emotion. Anchoring isn't always conscious. It builds through tone, consistency, and experience. Master this, and you'll become a touchstone in people's emotional maps. Controlling the frame. Every conversation operates within a frame, an unspoken lens through which everything is interpreted. Power lies in choosing the frame before someone else does. For instance, if you present a negotiation as a collaboration instead of a competition, you've redefined the rules. If you frame feedback as a shared growth opportunity rather than criticism, you shift the emotional weight. Framing controls meaning, and meaning controls outcomes. The key is subtle dominance, setting the tone without declaring it. Mirage of complexity. When something seems complex, people assume it's valuable. This is why jargon, graphs, and frameworks often impress, even when they don't add substance. You don't need to confuse people, but you can signal intelligence and authority by layering your ideas with structured thought. People respect depth, even if they don't fully understand it. Present your ideas with enough texture to suggest expertise, then simplify them just enough to make them digestible. Complexity gets attention. Clarity earns trust. Blend both, and you'll hold the room. Use these tactics with caution. If you have listened until the end, comment 1%, you're in the top 1%.